Alright, so at some point during this video, it may get really dark. That's because the sun is currently setting, and I'm using my window curtains as a tripod right now. And the light bulb in my room went out, and I don't feel like changing it because I moved back up to college in like 2 weeks. So I'm not doing it. So the release of the Fear Street trilogy on Netflix has gotten me so freaking excited and hyped, because now teen horror books from the 80s and 90s are finally going to get the adaptations that they deserve. And I feel like this is now going to bring attention to this little niche, very specific genre that seems like it's faded away into the past, but now it's being brought back, and I'm very excited. Shout out to Brooklyn. She is seen in my Little Mermaid documentary that I made of our high school's production of it. The other day, she was like, "Avery, have you seen the Fear Street trilogy on Netflix?" I was like, "Yes." And then we got to talking. She was like, I haven't read the Fear Street books. I didn't even hear about them, but I want to read them now. And it made my heart extremely happy. And if you do more research, you'll find that this really, really specific thing, YA teen horror books from the 80s and 90s, there's a lot of authors and a lot of books that are a part of this little genre. They're apparently a pretty big thing back in the 80s and especially the 90s. And obviously the Goosebump books have been really popular because it spawned a painfully 90s TV series, 2 live-action movies that have come out in the recent years. I actually saw the second one in the theater because my brother used to be the biggest fan of Goosebumps. Also, Jack Black playing a fictionalized version of R.L. Stine is just awesome. And apparently The Babysitter, which I have all the books right here, apparently it's being worked into a TV series, which I'm very skeptical about because I think they'd work better as movies, but that's just me. I don't know. We'll see how it turns out. So I think this is all the R.L. Stine books that I have. I started this one, never finished it. In fact, I only read the first 2 chapters. It also has probably one of the worst book covers I've ever seen. This is the most recent R.L. Stine book that I've read. You can tell just by reading this that I guess his publisher really needed a book, and so he was like, fine, whatever, and he just put this together real quick because this book's pretty bad, actually. Look at this. Look how big the font is. They're just trying to stretch this thing out. Here's Lights Out. This is the only Fear Street book I've ever read, because R.L. Stine's also written teenage books or YA books that are not a part of the Fear Street series, but this one is about a summer camp, and I think it's what Fear Street 1978 was more or less based on. This one was pretty good. Hit and Run, it's basically I Know What You Did Last Summer and Chain Letter by Christopher Pike, which I'll get onto Chain Letter later. This one was alright. Had the dumbest plot twist though. I was not expecting it in a bad way. Literally the big plot twist is that it was one of the people in the car that did it, but they didn't actually kill anyone because he was already dead. And this kid, he got out a dead body and he set it on the road so they could hit it. And because this kid was mad at his friends because they always it was stupid. This is another one I started. I think I got halfway through it and I never actually finished it because I lost the book. And by the time I found it, it had been so long, I forgot everything. So yeah, this one is the first R.L. Stine book that I've read. I liked it for the most part. It was pretty interesting, but then it had the most unexpected plot twist in a bad way. So we get this Back to the Future, and this book turns into Back to the Future, and everyone knows I love Back to the Future. It's one of my all-time favorite movies ever. But it just did not belong here. Like, literally, the big plot twist was that the house was a time portal. And you got the Babysitter series. Still haven't read... Oh, this is the third one. Still have never read the fourth one. I need to get on that. Read the first one, and as soon as I read the first one, I bought the second one. Because I got these 3, 1, 2, and... No. 1, 3, and 4 in like a collection off of eBay, but the second one wasn't included, so I had to buy this one separate, and I didn't realize that this one would be a different cover from the other ones, and that just irritates me. Like, it doesn't like bother me, it doesn't keep me up at night, but you should have seen my disappointment when I tore open the package and saw that it didn't look similar to this. But whatever, I guess. Plus, this cover's so boring. It's so plain. First one's pretty good. I remember the second one also being alright, but the third one got really stupid. Had a really dumb ending, so I think that's why I've put off reading the fourth one, because I'm like, oh, it's going there, huh? Then finally, this is probably my favorite R.L. Stine book I've read. Blind Date, which also so happens to be R.L. Stine's very, very first book that he ever wrote, or ever got published. I think he ever wrote. This one was actually pretty good. Like, I really liked it. Probably the biggest thing that I remember and took away from this book is the fact that the main character is described as looking like Ralph Macchio. And, like, that's not even just, like, a throwaway line. Like, that is said throughout the entire book. So it's definitely a product of its time because of that. Because, this is copyrighted in 1986. So I guess if you didn't know what Ralph Macchio looked like, I guess you're just screwed. I guess you're just not going to know what this dude looks like. So while R.L. Stine is more or less the king of children's horror books, Christopher Pike is the king of YA horror. And as you can tell, I'm a fan. Oh shoot, I forgot one. Forgot the really bad one. Oh yeah, and this one. I'll get to that one later. You're probably wondering what started this obsession. Well, in case you're new to my channel, I'm obsessed with the 80s. People in my real life know me as being obsessed with the 80s, and I like the early 90s as well. Not a big fan of the mid-90s and beyond. Have a soft spot for the 2010s though, because, you know, that's nostalgic to me. Like, legitimately nostalgic to me. How I got started on this obsession is that my mom was a big fan of horror books like this when she was a teenager as well. And so my brother used to be a huge fan of the Goosebumps books. So she found a big lot on eBay full of these books. So the books that were in this lot: Beach Party, oh my gosh, I'm dropping all of them, Hit and Run, Lights Out, Beach House, and I think those were all the R.L. Stine ones, and then Fall into Darkness, Spellbound, Chain Letter, and The Immortal. My mom really, really wanted me to read them because she enjoyed reading them so much when she was younger. And at the time, I wasn't like a big reader. Like, when I was actually reading a book, I enjoyed it, but the only books that I read and I was interested in were books from like really popular franchises. So like Harry Potter and the Hunger Games. Yeah, that's basically it actually. That's like all I read. And I've never even finished the Harry Potter books. So like I wasn't a big reader. So I put off reading these books for a while actually. Probably a year. Until one day I think I was just bored. And I finally picked up and read The Immortal. This is the book that started my obsession, so it's very special to me. The reason why I chose this one was because this was one of my mom's most favorite books when she was younger, and I read it and I fell in love with reading, and I fell in love with this entire genre. And I think that was about my junior year of high school. So it's been a few years now, and I'm about to be a sophomore in college. So the only Christopher Pike book that was adapted into a movie was Fall into Darkness, and it was a TV movie, and I read the book before watching the movie, and I was very, very disappointed by the movie. Like, the movie didn't even, like, it kind of followed the book. It cut out a lot, and apparently they were talking about turning Chain Letter into a movie after this one. But as soon as Christopher Pike watched the movie for this, he was like, no, y'all aren't doing this again. But I guess Christopher Pike is willing to let his books be turned into movies again, because apparently the Midnight Club is currently in the works. Either, I think it's actually a TV anthology show for that one. Christopher Pike also had his own version of Goosebumps called Spooksville, and that was turned into a TV show, but it only lasted for one season and has been since forgotten. Literally, there is so much content that could be made into movies. Like, there's so much potential here because Christopher Pike has such a big library. It's honestly a shame that it hasn't worked out, because there's, oh my gosh, there's so much freaking content. Lord, now it's time for Christopher Pike tropes, and not all these tropes are a bad thing, but this is just stuff that, like, happens a lot in his books, and, like, not all these tropes happen in every single book of his, but, like, a lot of them happen a lot. Trope number 1. The main characters are the ones that you're supposed to be rooting for kinda suck. And don't get me wrong, characters need to have flaws, and all these books center around teenagers. Of course they're gonna have flaws, because teenagers are screw-ups. Like, I'm 19, I'm still a screw-up, but, like, some of them are just insufferable, and, like, you don't care what happens to them because they're just mean. Like, the main character in Witch did not like her. Main character in this book, I'll get to this book later. The characters in Bury Me Deep, was not a fan of them. What, Sheldon? What? Why are you meowing? And then in another relation to characters not being the best of people, another trope that happens in Christopher Pike books is that a lot of the male characters sexually harass a lot of the female ones, and it's played off as a joke. Like, they'll talk about wanting to do things with these female characters, and they'll even grab them in places that they don't want to be grabbed in, and it's just played off as a funny joke, and it's like, no. And a lot of the guys that do this in these books are, like, friends with the girls, and I'm sorry, I don't, like, to all my guy friends, I don't care how close you are to me. If you touch me in any way I don't want to be touched, you're getting clocked. Another trope. Weird, scary dreams about blood. I think this happens in almost every single one. Like, the main character's brother, he has a weird dream about blood from what I remember. Main character in Witch, she has a weird dream about blood. Monster. This is, granted, the dreams about blood actually were understandable in this one. And, like, this trope isn't necessarily a bad one. It's just, when you read a lot of Christopher Pike ones, you notice that it happens a lot in his books. This one definitely had dreams about blood in it, because, I mean, the plot is about monsters who eat people, I guess. Christopher Pike trope. Really strange and out there plot points you'd never, ever see coming. And, like, this is not a bad thing at all. I love this trope, because it blows my mind almost every time. The main girls in this story are reincarnated Greek goddesses. The girl was possessed by a vulture. The guy who did it faked his death. The main girl and her friend were switched at birth, but her friend is dating her other friend's brother, so that makes her boyfriend her biological brother. She jumped off a cliff and faked her death, but she was strapped to a harness the whole time, so it's fine. There was something in the water that was causing it. Okay, I actually did kind of see this one coming, but it was executed really well. Alright, so now I'm gonna review each Christopher Pike book that I've read in order. I already talked about The Immortal a little bit. Very special to me. I really want this one to be a movie. I tried making one on The Sims 2, but I think that's on my other computer, and I don't know where I put my other computer, so that one's lost. Probably forever, actually. I didn't get very far, so I didn't lose much. And this one made me really, really want to go to Greece. Now, I've actually been to Greece, but that was on a cruise, and so we couldn't, like, get off the ship for very long, and I was 9. So I don't remember much of Greece, and I want to go back. If you put together Mamma Mia, Percy Jackson, and horror, this is what you get. Then I read Chain Letter, and this book, oh my goodness, this is probably my favorite Christopher Pike book. My favorite book ever. I don't know. I forgot a lot of what happened because it's been a good like 2.5 years since I've read it, and a lot happens. Yeah, like it basically throughout the whole book, you're trying to guess who's doing this to them, and you know it's one of like the people in the friend group. My favorite scene in this book was the one where I think her name is Allison. She was stuck in her house at night with the killer inside her house, and so like the way he wrote it, oh my gosh, it was so good. And like usually I don't get scared by books because I'm like, okay, like you're not actually like watching it, you're just imagining it, but man, like whew, it went hard. Next one I read is Spellbound. I really liked the location where they're at because it's like in this like pine tree, naturey, mountainy adjectives. It's in like that kind of setting. So basically the whole premise is that this girl gets killed and everyone thinks her boyfriend did it, which he didn't. And it turns out it was this British foreign exchange student, but it wasn't actually, like it's her body, but her body got taken over by a vulture. Next one I read was Fall into Darkness. I had this book done in like, I kid you not, a day. I had this book done in a day. Mainly because I really, really wanted to watch the movie. So I was motivated to get this book done. The movie wasn't even worth it though. But yeah, this one is pretty good. This one, now it's not really this big. This is 3 books in one. So I've read this much. And I still have the bookmark in here, because I don't think I'll read the second one. Now, I said that Chain Letter is probably one of the best books I've ever read. This is the worst book I've ever read. Not gonna go into too much detail, but because honestly, my hatred for this book could be an entire video. And it's been like 2 years since I've read it, so I need to like read it again to like refresh my memory. But yeah, I hated this book. She's supposedly the last vampire, and she'll let you know that she is the most special, most beautiful, most wonderful thing in the universe. You do not like her. Like, you hate her, actually. And if you like legitimately hate your main character, you're just gonna hate the book. And like there's a lot of stuff in this book that was just really just dumb, because there's like 6 books or 7 books in this series. Why? It's bad. And in fact, I actually do have the 4th one right here. Haven't read it, don't plan on it. I got this in a lot off of eBay, and apparently she's human again, and she's pregnant, but the baby grows at a supernatural speed. So I see where Stephanie Meyer got inspiration for Breaking Dawn from. This book, a total dud. Next. And I think the next one that I read is Remember Me. This book's also up there. It's really good. Like, it's heartbreaking. It's interesting because you're like trying to figure out who killed her. There is a sequel. I think there's 2 sequels actually. Haven't read them, don't own them. And I forgot to mention, there's also a sequel for Chain Letter. Haven't read it, don't plan on it. It looks absolutely dumb. Oh, another thing about Remember Me is that, like very, very recently, as of like this year, I was in a bookstore and I saw a brand new edition of Remember Me being sold. It made me excited. And the new cover doesn't look bad either. It's actually just like this, but more modern, and I like it actually. One of the biggest things I remember from this book is that this girl's ghost jumps inside of an air bubble to contact her brother who's alive. Something like that. It was really good though. Bury Me Deep. This is down there with Last Vampire. Not as bad as Last Vampire. And I thought I'd really like this one because it's about friends who go to Hawaii. And I'm like, oh, that's a nice setting. But the biggest thing I remember about this book is that it's basically a scuba diving manual. Like, I think I've never actually scuba dived before, But I think after reading Bury Me Deep, I should have been certified in scuba diving, because Christopher Pike goes into just very, very intense detail about scuba diving. And I don't remember much about her friends, but I remember one of her friends dies, I think. Like, she, like, gets pushed out of a hotel room. I mean, there were still some stuff about this book that I like. I like the whole mystery of, like, oh, she saw this kid die on a plane, but everyone's like, oh, he wasn't even there, blah, blah, blah. That was pretty cool, actually. And I like the Hawaii setting. That was nice. Oh, the back of this book. Horrible dreams filled with cold blood. Yeah, that tells you one of Christopher Pike's tropes. Alright, next book I read, Monster. This one, pretty solid. It's also up there. Like, this book is just, like, non-stop, but in a good way. Like, so much, like, it's just a constant go, go, go. Like, the book literally opens up with a girl, like, storming into a house party and then shooting people. Like, it's insane. And, like, the thing is, like, this girl, she's not crazy or anything. Like, she actually had a motive, and at first no one believes her motive because it's insane. She's like, oh, these people were turned into monsters. They weren't actually themselves anymore. I was trying to save everyone. And the main girl is like, what? But then the main girl starts slowly turning into one of these monsters as well. And you realize, let's see, Angela. Yeah, Angela. She actually had a good reason. And this book was also, like, upsetting at times because, like it needed to be upsetting, don't get me wrong. But there was a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of characters that died in this book that I did not want them to die. I actually really cared about them. I think my favorite character in this book, Mary, she's the main girl, was her best friend. And for whatever reason, I imagine him is in my head as Ralph Macchio. And he wasn't described as being like Ralph Macchio, like in Blind Date. But I don't know. I just imagine him as Ralph Macchio, and he ended up dying. I remember he died pretty brutally, actually, and I was very upset. And Mary ends up dying too. In fact, everyone in this book dies. It's a very, very grim ending. But I guess it needed to be. Very grim book, but it was very, very good. And it had like that B-movie horror kind of vibe to it. Road to Nowhere. This has a pink and green color scheme to the cover, so does Witch, and it's what I based my eye makeup in this video off of. I need to find a light. So this is Road to Nowhere. This book was kind of confusing. Like, it wasn't, like, most of the time it was not confusing, but the way it ended just made the entire story confusing. This is definitely a character-driven book, which I really like. And Christopher Pike focuses a lot on his characters in, like, every book, don't get me wrong. But his books are mostly plot, mainly, like, pretty plot-heavy. But I love character-driven stories and driven, haha, get it? This is basically just 3 people in a car talking, like, just almost the entire story. And you would think that'd be boring, but, like, it's actually, like, good because this girl, these hitchhikers that she picks up, they have their own, like, stories, and, like, they're just exchanging stories, but then it turns out that their stories do connect with each other. And plot twist, she was dead the whole time. She wasn't dead the whole time, but she was, like, in a, like a, I can't really explain it. You'd have to read the book, honestly. Like, I've been spoiling all these books left and right, but this one, you gotta read it, I guess. I can't really explain it, but wasn't the biggest fan of the ending, but I really like the main girl, especially what her friend and her boyfriend did to her. Like, I felt really, really sorry for her when that happened. Usually I'm a fan of the Christopher Pike plot twists because they're like, what? But this one, I was like, oh. The latest one that I have read is Witch. I was actually let down by this one. This is one that I actually, instead of just getting it in like a big lot of books, I bought it by itself because I really wanted to read it because I liked the premise. I read like the back. I liked the plot. Like, look at this cover. This is probably my favorite cover, actually. Because look at it. Like, it's just cool. Like, you're like, oh, it's a spooky figure and a girl looking at a mystical lake. And it's about a girl with magical powers. And you think it's going to be a book about, like, witchy shenanigans and superpowers. And no, this book was just a giant revenge story. The book itself is fine, but personally, I wasn't a fan because I was not expecting a revenge story. I feel like the cover and the title are kind of misleading. Yes, she's a witch, and like this cover, like this does happen in the book. Other than that, it's just a story about a girl just getting revenge. And also the main girl, what's her name? Julia. Not a fan of her. There's this running joke throughout the whole book where she steals her friend's boyfriend, and her friend, I loved her friend though. What was her friend's name again? Amy. Because, like, she's such a good friend, even though Julia kind of treated her like crap at times. And yeah, Julia's going through a lot, don't get me wrong. But even before Julia's mom dies, Julia's not a really good friend to her. There's this joke where, like, Julia steals every one of Amy's boyfriends, and Amy's just fine with it. And Amy's like, well, she doesn't mean to do it. Girl, you deserve better than that, bro. And, like, and a big plot point in the book is that Julia steals Amy's latest boyfriend. I think Jim is his name? I think Jim is the same name as the antagonist and monster. And, like, throughout this whole book, her aunt is, like, stalking her. And her aunt has, like, a big coven of witches, and she's, like, stalking her, or she's trying to find Julia the whole book. And everyone's trying to stop them. And it's, like, a whole thing. But the thing is, Julia actually dies in the book, and she dies before her aunt can, like they don't even really say what her aunt was trying, like, why her aunt was stalking her. Like, that was never resolved, and I hated that, because, like, that was the main thing I was looking forward to, actually. I was like, oh, what's her aunt gonna do? I mean, if you want a whole book about revenge, this is the book for you. But if you want a book about fun witch shenanigans, this ain't it. And now we're all caught up, and currently I'm reading Weekend. This is actually one of Christopher Pike's very first books, and I'm really enjoying it so far.
Hi, update editing, Avery here. I read all of Weekend. I finished it like yesterday or 2 days ago, and I really liked it.
I bought this one and Last Act, in which I still haven't read Last Act because I just got it. This is one of my mom's most favorite books. This is actually like her favorite one when she was younger. This one and The Immortal. And The Immortal was the very first one I read. And I really wanted to read this one because my mom talked about how much she loved it. And I really like the premise where it's just like a secluded vacation goes wrong. And I like stories like that because I feel like when your story mainly takes place in one location, you have to get creative. But I would love to see this be made into a movie. Can I be in the movie? And there's some Christopher Pike books that I have not read yet. I have the Final Friends trilogy. Yeah, I know there's only 2 books here because I lost the first one. I lost the first book. I actually started reading the first book. I read like the first chapter or 2. I lost it, and I don't want to buy a new one. So I'm just hoping it will turn up one day and I'll be like, oh. And the only other one I have left to read is Whisper of Death. And I have Last Act, which I mentioned. I haven't read that one yet. I read the first few chapters of this one, and I was liking it. But, I don't know why I stopped reading it. And I don't know why. Like, I guess I just put it down one day and, forgot about it. But I'll have to get on this one again, because I heard this one's also pretty good. So that was, my deep dive into my Christopher Pike obsession. My obsession with teen YA books horror books from the 80s and 90s, but mainly Christopher Pike. Okay, this is not a Christopher Pike book. What's it? Oh, I also own this one, Twins by Caroline B. Cooney. It was alright. Really sad, but then it kind of got a little dumb at the end. Whatever. She's a pretty good author, though. I'll have to check out more of her stuff. But, I think what I love most about these books is that the teen characters aren't treated as being stupid. Their problems are presented in a way where it's like if John Hughes wrote horror books about teenagers, if that makes sense. Like, their problems are not treated as being ridiculous or stupid or not a big deal. Like, no, it is a big deal. I just love, like, the crazy supernatural stuff that happens. I don't know how in the world Christopher Pike came up with this stuff. Like, a vulture being stuck inside a girl's body. And the only one that I truly did, like, I like pretty much all of these, and, like, I love a lot of them. The only one that I really dislike, kind of hate it actually, is The Last Vampire. But there's even stuff in The Last Vampire that I was like, oh, okay, I can get behind this. There wasn't much of that, though. And I'm really happy to see that this genre is really starting to have a resurgence. And I'm really hoping that I could have someone else my age that I can share my love for with these. Oh my gosh, it's so dark. I look like a floating head. Thank you guys for watching this video about me rambling about my little obsession, my collection. I went off script for most of this video, and I feel like I got through it. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I probably rambled a lot. I'll probably be editing this video and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I need to shut up. Anyway, thank you guys for watching.